The Vietnam War started November 1st, 1955 to the 30th of April, 1975, but Australia only became involved in August 1962. Over 6,000 Australians, including ground troops, Air Force, and Navy personnel, went to Vietnam. 521 died as a result of the war, but the men and women that did come back had to survive with many physical effects such as broken bones, scars, and bullet wounds. Unfortunately, that wasn't the only thing veterans had to deal with. Psychological effects became a reality for some veterans, things such as PTSD. To get a better perspective on the impacts, we interviewed an Australian Vietnam veteran. Here's what he had to say.
So how old were you when you served in there?
Well, I was when I went in I was 21, but then I got out at 23, so
Yeah.
we ran out of water and we couldn't get a resupply because there was a big fight going on with Charlie Company and we were out in the bush. And we walked for a day without water and finally found a creek, filled up our water bottles, and then there's this terrible smell. So we walked up the creek upstream, and there was a pile of VC bodies in the creek, all their maggots and all bits of fish going down the creek. And they'd been shot by Americans about a week before, but they were decomposing. Yeah. Terrible sight. And so all the water we picked up, we poured it all out and went up the stream a bit further and got more water.
Yeah.
I watch the glee while you keep.
Yeah. What are the impacts on the Vietnam veterans? What do you?
Well,
what would they be?
Yes, I think some people have just got on with their lives and treated Vietnam as an experience. Other people have fallen by the wayside and, they have been affected by it, for sure. It has affected some people. Like one of my great friends thought he was going to make a fortune out of real estate and he drank a lot and he virtually drank himself to death.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Many veterans, 3,000 to be exact, were wounded in the war and faced serious physical impacts. While being on constant alert, it's easy to fall victim to booby traps, gunshots, and other military-related incidents. This can usually result in soldiers inheriting bullet wounds, shrapnel wounds, infections, brain damage, and paralyzing injuries. Some of these impacts would produce after effects which can lead to loss of eyesight, loss of hearing, and even death. Before we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder and Australian veterans, PTSD is a particular set of reactions that develop in people who've been through a traumatic event which threatened their life or safety. As a result, the person experiences feelings of intense fear, helplessness, or horror. The war can present horrific experiences that live with a soldier's whole life. Veterans that have been through traumatic times and regularly revisit them can be diagnosed with PTSD. Veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder affects their way of life. Certain things can be a trigger and it can break down a person emotionally and mentally. Another aspect to consider is how PTSD has a flow-on effect on marriages. Marriages fail due to the mental state of the veteran. Other ways vets were affected by the war is many Vietnam vets were forced to go back to their own lives straight away. As it's very shameful to be a Vietnam vet, many would lie about where and what they were doing while they were fighting in the war. At times, veterans were abused by people and they were blamed for the war. Aside from the psychological damage inflicted on the veterans, by the late 1970s many believed they had additionally been harmed while battling in Vietnam. Between 1962 and 1971, more than 17 million gallons of herbicides were utilised as a part of the Vietnam War to clear vegetation. This action was known as Operation Ranch Hand. During Ranch Hand, American and Australian soldiers were exposed to the chemicals. In 1978, a report stated that Agent Orange is linked with creating higher chance of getting cancer, birth defects in children born to those exposed to the herbicide, and brain dysfunction. Many of the veterans have been exposed to this and may experience one of these effects. After the war was finished and the Australian troops came home, they were furious and confused by the response they met. They were not welcomed home as they expected they would be. Numerous veterans felt like they were being blamed for the war, rather than the government. soldiers did not get an official welcome home parade until 1987, almost 20 years after the last soldiers left Vietnam. Not surprisingly, numerous veterans felt their support of their nation went unrecognized and they were not appreciated for their efforts in the war.
After returning from the war, many of the veterans felt as if they were blamed for the war. However, as a result of the Vietnam War, Australia has become more of a liberal society, allowing much more diversity throughout the country. Many things like politics, fashion, gender roles, jobs and beliefs all started to change after the Vietnam War. During the Vietnam era, migrants were allowed to migrate from Asia to Australia, as well as the White Australian policy was no longer in place. Just 10 years after the Vietnam War had ended, it was estimated that 90,000 Chinese migrants had migrated to Australia. Indigenous descent, mainly women, had more rights and opportunities than ever before, and Australia was starting to become a more liberal society, creating more opportunities for many more people. All of these changes to Australia was a result of the Vietnam War. This has impacted the way Australia accepts and embraces multiculturalism in today's society. As the Vietnam War came to an end, Australia began to form closer relationships with many of the surrounding countries, including East Asia, China, South Korea, and Japan.
The Vietnam War ended in 1975, with Australia's involvement ending in 1972. The Vietnam War had a significant impact on Australian veterans, causing major impacts such as PTSD and a variety of others that caused them to be disconnected from society.